Thank you so much for your time today. Very appreciate
Yeah.
your time, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you so
I
much.
watched it
Yeah.
yesterday and really, really enjoyed it. And I went, it was one of those rare occasions when I went in without knowing too much. And I quite like that. I quite like
I love that
discovering
feeling.
things. You know, we live in a culture now where it's all about spoilers. So it's best to know the least amount of possible. But yeah, congratulations. It was a fantastic movie. I just wanted to start with your reaction to it when you first got the script and what made this kind of stand out amongst others that you might have read around the time.
Well, I received the script at a kind of special time for me. It was short, if I remember the timing correctly, it was shortly after I had just been to Sundance with another film, and it was my first time that I kind of had a more formal. Sorry, my cat is trying to photobomb me. Sorry, always happens. Go away. Um, but yeah, it was my first. I had at the beginning of that same year kind of like shared more publicly my new pronouns and my new name. And so I was kind of like stepping with my non-binary identity, bringing that into a more public space after having had it exist only in a more private one. So that was the first role I was offered in this kind of like new moment for me. And so I was like, oh, people are making, because when I went through that moment for myself, I was like, okay, well, I'm really curious what roles are going to be available to me, and there, not everyone is making films with, trans and non-binary roles, but obviously this film is putting that kind of role center stage and is about that experience. And I think specifically, I was quite excited about the kind of ensemble casting of the character. I thought that was just such a creative and interesting idea, and to me, it was like a good sign that Raynen was a producer on the film, who is a good friend of David's, and who is kind of um, just to have like other trans and non-binary people on the other side of the camera was always a good sign to me in terms of projects like this. So those are some factors that I was like, "Ooh, I'm really excited about this," and yeah, reading through the script and imagining like kind of like switching between these different versions of Denny was something that I was really like interested in and drawn to.
What when you spoke to David, obviously you read the script and everything. What was his kind of vision for it? Why did he want to tell it in this way with the multiple kind of personality, multiple actors, should I say, playing the
Yeah.
same role? I mean, what was it about his kind of pitch, I guess, that sold you on it? Because it's a very unique way of doing it, but also it works very, very well
Yeah.
with the story and with kind of the relationship at the center of it.
Yeah, I mean, when I was first talking to him, not all the other Denny's were cast. I think Liv was the only other one cast at the time that I came on board. Um, and he shared that it was an idea that he'd come up with also with Raynen about to kind of show the way in which this is often an issue of representation. Is you're trying, let's say there's a trans character, it's really easy for that character to then be kind of slotted into being this example of what that experience is, whereas obviously we know we're all having totally unique experiences in whatever gender we have, in whatever kind of like identity we have in our lives. So I think the idea was to kind of play with that that representation trap that happens sometimes by showing that like a non-binary person can look a lot of different ways. And actually when I first came on the project, there was even the idea to have actors play Denny who were maybe assigned male at birth. um, Obviously at the end that didn't end up being the casting decision, but I just thought that kind of like playful approach to a portrayal of a non-binary identity was really interesting to me, especially in a movie where you're watching someone go through different medical transitions around their gender and identity. So yeah, it's like I like the idea that being non-binary doesn't look one way, and so it's nice to have different representations of that, affirm that reality.
Yeah. And how was it working with Alex? Because he's obviously the kind of consistent through the movie in the sense that he is just playing his character Ryan all the way through and
Yeah.
everything else. So how was I mean, did you specifically speak to him about your portion, or was it just a kind of general the love story between the two characters as a whole?
Well, I really wondered what it was like for him to kind of go between us all. I was like, we would joke that we're actually like, it's actually, what if the film is actually just that like we're all in a polyamorous relationship and there are four Dennys. But no, I mean, Alex was really lovely, like he was such, I feel like he was just such a good sport. Like he was really up for, I love working on a film where the narrative is following a trans experience and the cis men know their place. Just in the sense that he was very respectful and like in particular, there are sex scenes in the movie, and I think those are often scenes that are written kind of open-endedly in a script and can be approached in a lot of different ways. And specifically in a sex scene that we had, it was really interesting to talk about, okay, but what's going on with the gender dynamics here? Like what's happening in terms of like, reckoning with his queerness, that he didn't know he was like a queer person. He thought he was just a straight lawyer. And now what's going on for him, and I just feel like he was really game for some more complex conversations, which was great.
Yeah, I spoke to Liv earlier actually. It was very late her time because she's halfway around the world, so it's
Yeah.
always strange. But I spoke to her that spoke to Bex Taylor Klaus recently about a film called Blackbird that she did with Kate Winslet, and how the role was originally written one way, but then when she came into the pattern, it changed and changed for her. It was specifically then changed for her to do it.
Yeah.
Do you see that there's kind of changes happening, that people are becoming more aware in the industry that things don't always have to be black and white, that there are colors, and different experiences for people experience in life, and that those things should be reflected in the cinema? Do you think that there's slowly but surely it's becoming something that people are starting to take a little bit more seriously than maybe they did 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me somehow it makes sense that like with the kind of like heightened kind of like questioning of patriarchy and push against patriarchy, like with that comes the questioning of binary gender in and of itself, because there are many people all over the world for all time that humans have existed who have existed outside of that binary, with whatever language they had at the time or in the place. But to acknowledge that, and not only acknowledge it, but like really make space for that, and it benefits everyone, is kind of my feeling. It's like as soon as we start to honor and acknowledge our difference, like it's a good situation for everyone. It's like yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that I'm noticing that is happening, I think, in films and in scripts that I read. I think scripts are getting more interesting as they get more, I don't know, it's just a more dynamic world to include people of different experiences. It's like, it's interesting. Sometimes I watch, movies where I'm like, there's only white actors in this movie. Like that is the limitation to like what's going on here. Like it's probably going to be slightly less interesting than like, I don't know, just there's so many different dynamics that happen between like lots of different identities, historically and on screen and whatever, that I'm for the trend of including more different kinds of people than have been like center stage historically.
Yeah. And obviously you're playing at Raindance, which is such a great kind of prestigious festival. How excited are you all that it's going to be seen at a festival? Because it seems like it's a great platform for a movie, not just a movie like this, but independent movies. They have such a difficult
Yeah.
time getting seen, particularly even more so these days, given that there isn't that many cinemas actually open. But how happy are you that it's getting that kind of audience? Because it feels like that's the kind of the first audience that you want to see. You want to see people that are embracing indie film and all the stories that
Yeah.
might not be seen in the cinema, with so many blockbusters filling up the cinemas usually.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel really excited. It's always, especially when you work on an indie, you're like, where's it going to go? Like, who's going to see it? What's going to happen? And so it's just really fun. It feels like, I don't know, time in COVID and also time in working on films is always very like abstract to me. I'm like, I feel like we just wrapped yesterday, but also I feel like it was 1,000 years ago. So it always like catches me by surprise whenever a premiere is happening. I'm like, oh my God, the little movie we made is, even if it's not a little movie, I'm like, oh, people are gonna actually see it. Wow. It's exciting, and it's especially like in this time where premieres don't look the same way. I mean, I'm gonna admit, I feel a little like, oh, I wish I could really be there in person and like, hug everybody. And, obviously I miss certain things about, premieres of the past, but I'm just glad that it gets to have its own version. And I think, who knows what kind of special new audience experiences will like be made possible by this shift.
Yeah, absolutely. How have you enjoyed? Obviously, you've had quite a decent career in terms of the stuff you've been able to do so far. You've worked with, you did Nocturnal Animals. You worked with Kevin Bacon, Catherine Hahn. You did Under the Silver Lake, which is just an incredible film that I love. Are you enjoying dipping your toe into all these different things? That must be the exciting part of, especially for, you're still in the infancy of your career, to get to dip your toe into all these amazing stories, and not just, jumping into, say, a big Marvel movie or something. You're getting to do all these amazing stories about these amazing people. That must be the exciting part, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like, I guess if I would have like gotten some big blockbuster or something at the beginning of like my time acting, like I probably would have just ran with it, and who knows what that would have been like. But I do, from the vantage point that I have now, I really prefer the version that I'm at now. I think it's also, I have to think about like, oh my God, if I was like coming out publicly as like trans and non-binary with like the kind of level of celebrity that like other people have, like, it just was already a lot of pressure to just have any following and be like, oh God, like people are looking at me, and I'm trying to figure out like who I am, it can be kind of awkward. So I feel really grateful that I've been able to like, I don't know. It's funny. It's interesting to like hear it reflected back to me, this kind of like, this like trajectory of my career where I feel like I have been able to work on like so many really cool movies and with like so many people that I just really like respect and I'm obsessed with. And I'm like, oh my God, I actually like worked with you, or, like Andrea Arnold's who directed, on I Live Dick. I'm like, oh my God, you're so cool. And then to kind of still be able to like also be, I feel like I'm still very much like in an indie realm. Like the last film I worked on was like, an experimental Polish film that we just like wrapped on, on a boat in the Baltic Sea like a couple weeks ago. Like, I don't know. I like my job. Yeah.
I was going to say, as you do, in Poland, do all these all these things as you do. So it is. And just as a final question, then, it sounds like such a silly question, I guess. But for audiences that don't know too much about the film, what would you say that they can kind of expect when they watch the film, if they see it at Raindance or whenever they get to see it?
These questions always stumps me. I'm like not so good at this one, but I mean, I think it's a film about love and like the limitations of like, a romantic relationship, to hold like deep questioning and like changes that someone might have to go through on their own, in themselves and in their identity. But like the way in which like through queerness, like there can be a pivot towards like friendship that is really like beautiful and profound. So I hope you like it. I don't know.
That's good enough. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Absolute pleasure. Good luck with the movie.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so
Be
much.
well.
Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice. Hey